Sarah's alarm screamed at 6:30 a.m., jolting her from what felt like no sleep at all. 7 hours in bed, her fitness tracker confirmed, yet her body felt like she'd been hit by a truck. She stared at the ceiling of her cramped Tokyo apartment, wondering how Hiroshi from accounting always looked so calm at morning meetings, while she struggled to keep her eyes open. The mirror in her tiny bathroom reflected what she'd been avoiding: puffiness around her eyes, skin that looked grey despite expensive serums, and a tightness in her face that spoke of stress living permanently in her jaw. 3 years in Tokyo, climbing the corporate ladder at a tech firm, and her body was keeping a different score than her resume. Her phone buzzed with notifications: Instagram fitness influencers promising abs in 30 days, YouTube ads for metabolism boosters, and a reminder from her gym app that she'd missed 5 sessions this month. The irony wasn't lost on her. She lived in one of the healthiest countries in the world, surrounded by people who seemed to effortlessly maintain slim figures and serene energy, while she felt like she was failing at every Western wellness trend. During the morning commute, pressed against other bodies in the packed train car, Sarah noticed something that had become a daily meditation. While most foreign residents like herself scrolled phones or dozed fitfully, many Japanese passengers sat with an almost meditative stillness. Their breathing seemed deeper, their shoulders less hunched. Even in sleep, they appeared more at rest than she felt after a full night in bed. At her desk, clutching her 3rd coffee before 10 a.m., she watched Hiroshi methodically unpack his lunch from a small wooden box. Steam rose from what looked like a thimble-sized portion of rice in a ceramic bowl, accompanied by several tiny dishes of vegetables and soup. The entire meal could have fit in her palm, yet he ate with deliberate attention, chopsticks moving slowly, pausing between bites. "You always look so peaceful when you eat," Sarah found herself saying. Hiroshi glanced up, surprised. "Ah, perhaps it is the bowl. My grandmother's bowl, very small, but enough." He lifted the ceramic rice bowl, no bigger than a large coffee cup, white with a simple blue pattern around the rim. It was beautiful in its simplicity, worn smooth by decades of use. "My grandmother said the bowl teaches the stomach, not the mind." Sarah stared at her desk salad, a massive container of lettuce, protein, and superfoods that would leave her hungry again in 2 hours. She'd been fighting her appetite with willpower and large volumes of low-calorie foods, believing more was somehow better. But Hiroshi's tiny portions seemed to satisfy him completely. That evening, exhausted from another 12-hour day, Sarah found herself in the convenience store below her apartment building, staring at the bento boxes under fluorescent lights. Instead of her usual grab-and-go approach, she studied how they were arranged: small compartments, balanced colors, modest portions that somehow looked complete rather than restrictive. The elderly store clerk, Mr. Tanaka, noticed her lingering. "First time really looking?" he asked in careful English. "I guess I never paid attention to the portions." He smiled knowingly. "My wife, she uses very small dishes at home. We eat less, but we enjoy more. The stomach learns." Back in her apartment, Sarah sat on the floor at her low table, a setup that had felt awkward when she first moved in, but now seemed intentional. She opened the small bento box and found herself eating more slowly than usual, partly because the portions demanded attention rather than mindless consumption. As she prepared for bed, Sarah noticed the ceramic rice bowl from her grandmother's china set, stored unused in her kitchen cabinet. It was nearly identical in size to Hiroshi's, small, simple, forgotten. She pulled it out and set it on her counter, a quiet promise for tomorrow. For the first time in months, she fell asleep without scrolling her phone, though she couldn't explain why. If you've ever felt tired even after a full night of sleep, or frustrated with diets that don't last, tell us in the comments which part of this story feels familiar, and stay with us for the next chapters. The next morning, Sarah filled her grandmother's small bowl with rice from the convenience store, barely half a cup. Sitting at her low table, she felt ridiculous. This couldn't possibly be enough food for a grown woman with a demanding job. Yet as she ate with chopsticks, forced to take smaller bites, something unexpected happened. The meal stretched longer than usual, and by the final grain she felt satisfied. At work, Hiroshi noticed her small lunch container. "Ah, you found a proper bowl." "It's my grandmother's, actually, but I don't understand how this tiny amount can feel like enough." "Maybe because your stomach has time to speak to your brain. In Japan, we say hara hachibu, eat until 80% full. The body knows, but only if we listen." Sarah had spent years fighting her hunger, treating her appetite as an enemy to defeat rather than information to interpret. The concept felt foreign, yet oddly familiar, like remembering something she'd once known. Dr. Yamamoto, Sarah's physician, had been monitoring her stress markers for months. Elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep patterns, the early warning signs of metabolic dysfunction that plagued so many expat professionals. "Your latest results show some improvement in inflammatory markers," he noted during her monthly checkup. "Are you doing anything differently? Just eating from smaller dishes?" He nodded thoughtfully. "Environment shapes behavior more than willpower." Smart approach. But the changes weren't just physical. Sarah found herself eating at the low table consistently, which required sitting on the floor rather than standing in the kitchen or hunching over her laptop. The position naturally slowed her down, made meals feel more ceremonial than functional. Her friend Claire, visiting for the weekend, found the setup amusing. "You've gone full Japanese, haven't you? Are you meditating now too?" "It's just easier to eat slowly this way." "But aren't you hungry all the time with those tiny portions?" Sarah paused, realizing she wasn't. In fact, the constant background hunger that had plagued her for years, the need to snack, the evening binges, the never quite satisfied feeling after large meals had quietly disappeared. "Actually, I think I'm less hungry than before." Claire looked skeptical. "That doesn't make sense. Less food should mean more hunger." But Sarah was beginning to understand something her Western diet mentality had missed. Her previous approach, large portions eaten quickly while distracted, had left her body confused about satiation. The small bowl forced presence. The chopsticks demanded patience. The low table created ritual around something she'd been treating as mere fuel consumption. Mr. Tanaka at the convenience store had begun setting aside the most balanced bento boxes for her evening visits. "Eating well is not about amount," he explained one evening as she selected her dinner. "Is about harmony. Little bit of everything, nothing too much." Sarah thought about her old dinner routine. Massive salads or takeout containers eaten while watching Netflix. Her attention split between food and screens. She'd been multitasking her way through meals, never fully tasting anything, never allowing her nervous system to register satisfaction. Now, sitting quietly with her small portions, she found herself actually tasting her food. The subtle sweetness of properly seasoned rice, the clean brininess of miso soup, the satisfying crunch of pickled vegetables that somehow made her feel more awake than caffeine. 3 weeks into this new pattern, Sarah's jeans felt different, not dramatically, but noticeably looser around her waist. More surprisingly, her energy felt more stable throughout the day. No more afternoon crashes demanding sugary snacks. Hiroshi mentioned this phenomenon when she asked about it. When you eat past full, body works harder to process. When you stop at enough, energy stays available for other things. That evening, Sarah sat at her low table with the ceramic bowl, appreciating its weight in her hands. The bowl had become more than a dish. It was a boundary, a teacher, a tool for relearning hunger and satisfaction. Her grandmother had probably known this intuitively, from a time when meals were more precious and mindful eating wasn't a trendy concept, but a necessity. A month in, Sarah's transformation was becoming visible to others, though not in ways she'd expected. Her co-worker Jessica noticed first. "You look different. Did you change your skincare routine?" Sarah hadn't changed anything about her beauty regimen, but she had been sleeping better. The smaller evening meals meant her digestive system could rest overnight instead of working to process large dinners, leading to deeper, more restorative sleep cycles. Maybe it's just better sleep? Whatever you're doing, keep it up. You look calmer, calmer. Sarah realized this was accurate. The constant low-level anxiety about food, when to eat, how much, whether she was making the right choices, had dissolved. The small bowl had created clear boundaries that removed the mental energy she'd been spending on food decisions. But not everyone was supportive. During a video call with her sister back in California, the topic of Sarah's new habits came up. You're not eating enough for someone your size. That's not sustainable. I've never felt more satisfied after meals. It's probably just novelty. You'll be back to normal portions soon enough. Her sister's skepticism reflected Sarah's own internal resistance. Part of her still believed that restriction meant deprivation, that smaller portions equaled suffering. Yet the evidence of her body suggested otherwise. Stable energy, better sleep, clothes fitting more comfortably, and most surprisingly, genuine enjoyment of food. Dr. Yamamoto confirmed what Sarah was experiencing internally when her 3-month lab results came in. Your inflammatory markers have improved significantly. Cortisol levels are normalizing. Whatever you're doing is working at a cellular level. Really, from just eating smaller portions, portion control, but also eating rhythm. When you eat slowly, thoroughly chew food, give your parasympathetic nervous system time to engage properly, everything functions better. The science validated what traditional Japanese culture had always known, that how you eat matters as much as what you eat. The nervous system responds to pace, presence, and proper portions in ways that pure calorie restriction never achieved. Sarah began noticing other subtle shifts rippling through her daily routine. Because she felt satisfied with less food, her grocery bills decreased. Because meals took longer to eat mindfully, she'd started putting her phone away during eating. Because she no longer experienced dramatic energy swings, her coffee consumption had naturally reduced from 5 cups to 2. Hiroshi observed these changes during their lunch breaks. You understand now about the bowl teaching the stomach? I think it's teaching more than just my stomach. It's like retraining my whole relationship with eating. Yes, in Japan we say the food is medicine, but only if taken properly. That weekend, Claire visited again and immediately commented on Sarah's refrigerator. Where's all your food? This looks empty. Sarah's fridge, once crammed with large containers of meal-prepped food and diet products, now held smaller amounts of fresher ingredients. She was buying less, but eating more satisfying meals. I don't need to store as much food when I'm not constantly fighting hunger. But what if you get hungry between meals? I don't, really. When you eat until you're actually satisfied, not stuffed, you don't need to snack constantly. Claire tried eating from the small ceramic bowl that evening, joking about the tiny portions. But Sarah watched her friends struggle with the pace, reaching for seconds quickly, unable to sit with the brief moment of uncertainty between finishing the bowl and determining whether more food was actually needed. This is harder than it looks, Claire admitted. The hardest part was trusting that enough could actually be enough. That night, as Sarah washed her grandmother's bowl in the sink, she felt grateful for the simple wisdom embedded in its design. The bowl had become a bridge between her frantic Western relationship with food and something more ancient and sustainable. It wasn't about deprivation. It was about precision, presence, and respect for both food and body. Would you rather force yourself with willpower or redesign your environment and habits like this character is learning to do? Comment which path makes more sense to you, and share this episode with someone who needs a gentler approach to change. 3 months into her new routine, Sarah faced her first real test. Her company announced a major product launch requiring weeks of 12-hour days, catered meals, and deadline pressure that would have previously sent her into a spiral of stress eating and caffeine dependence. The conference room was filled with pizza boxes, energy drinks, and the kind of fuel designed to keep people working through exhaustion. Sarah watched her colleagues grab massive slices and eat standing up while reviewing presentations, food becoming just another form of efficiency. "You're not eating enough for someone pulling these hours," her manager noted as Sarah portioned a small amount of food into her ceramic bowl. She'd started bringing it to work for situations exactly like this. "I'll be fine." But privately, Sarah wondered if her new habits could withstand this level of professional pressure. The old version of herself would have powered through on adrenaline, sugar, and whatever was fastest to consume. Instead, she took 10 minutes to eat her small portions slowly, even amid the chaos. To her surprise, she felt more focused afterward, not less. While her colleagues experienced the energy crashes that come with stress eating, her stable approach to food kept her mental clarity consistent. Hiroshi, equally stressed by the deadline, maintained his small lunch routine despite the pressure. "How do you stay so calm during crunch time?" Sarah asked during a brief break. "Maybe because I do not change my rhythm when outside gets crazy. The bowl stays same size even when the day gets bigger." This insight struck Sarah profoundly. She'd always adjusted her self-care downward during stressful periods, eating worse, sleeping less, abandoning any routine that felt selfish. But what if the opposite approach was wiser? What if maintaining her rhythm was most important precisely when everything else felt chaotic? Dr. Yamamoto, checking in during this intense work period, was surprised by Sarah's stability. "Usually I see elevated stress markers during projects like this. Your cortisol levels are actually better than last month. I kept eating the same way, even with the long hours." "Ah, you protected your nervous system instead of adding food stress on top of work stress." Very wise. The breakthrough came during week 2 of the crunch period. Sarah's team was working through dinner, and catering had provided enormous sandwiches and sides. She watched colleagues eat quickly and complain about feeling sluggish, then reach for more coffee and sugar to counteract the post-meal crash. Sarah ate her small portion mindfully, taking a few minutes of quiet amid the noise. When she returned to work, her thinking felt clear, while others struggled with the afternoon energy dip that comes from overeating under stress. "How are you so sharp right now?" Jessica asked, struggling through a presentation review. "I think it's about not overwhelming my digestive system when my brain needs to work." This was the moment Sarah realized her relationship with food had fundamentally changed. It wasn't about restriction anymore, it was about optimization. The small bowl had taught her that eating was energy management, not emotional management. Claire, visiting during the final week of the project, was amazed by Sarah's composure. "You're the calmest stressed person I've ever seen. I learned not to add food chaos on top of work chaos." "That actually makes sense. I always eat terribly when I'm stressed, then feel worse." That evening, exhausted but proud as the project wrapped successfully, Sarah sat with her ceramic bowl containing a small portion of celebratory takeout. The bowl looked the same as it had 3 months ago, but her relationship to it had evolved completely. Initially, the bowl had been about portion control, a tool to eat less and hopefully lose weight. Now she understood it as something much deeper, a practice of presence, a boundary against the endless demands of both internal hunger and external pressure, and a daily reminder that enough was actually enough. The project had proven that her new habits weren't fragile or dependent on perfect conditions. They worked precisely because they were sustainable under pressure, supporting her nervous system instead of stressing it further. As she washed the bowl that night, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years, trust in her own body and its signals. The bowl had become a bridge between her and that trust, teaching her that caring for herself wasn't selfish maintenance, but essential fuel for everything else she wanted to accomplish. 6 months after discovering her grandmother's bowl, Sarah experienced a revelation that recontextualized everything. She was preparing breakfast, a small portion of rice in the familiar ceramic bowl, when she realized she hadn't thought about dieting in weeks. The woman who had tried every trending eating plan, counted calories obsessively, and fought daily battles with hunger and guilt had somehow disappeared without Sarah noticing. She wasn't being good with food or white-knuckling through cravings. She was simply living with different rhythms, different portions, different awareness. The breakthrough came during a conversation with Dr. Yamamoto about her 6-month results. "Your metabolic markers are excellent. Stable weight, improved sleep quality, reduced inflammation. What's most interesting is your relationship to hunger hormones has normalized." What does that mean exactly? Your body has relearned accurate hunger and satiety signaling. Most people living with chronic stress and irregular eating patterns lose this ability. You've restored it. Sarah realized this was the secret that diet culture had never acknowledged. The problem wasn't willpower or the right macronutrient ratio or expensive supplements. The problem was a nervous system stuck in fight or flight mode, making clear communication between stomach and brain impossible. The small bowl, the slow eating, the mindful presence, these weren't just portion control tricks. They were nervous system regulation tools, allowing her body to remember how satisfaction actually felt. That evening, Hiroshi joined Sarah for dinner at a small local restaurant, curious about her transformation. "You eat like Japanese person now," he observed, watching her naturally stop eating when satisfied rather than when her plate was empty. "I think I just eat like myself again, maybe for the first time since childhood. What is different? I trust my body now. Before I thought hunger was the enemy and fullness was the goal. But they're just information." Hiroshi nodded thoughtfully. "In Japan, we learn this early. But maybe you had to unlearn first before learning again." The conversation revealed what Sarah was beginning to understand. Her relationship with food had been a microcosm of her relationship with herself. Years of ignoring hunger signals, overriding satiety cues, and treating her body's needs as inconveniences had created a fundamental distrust between her mind and body. The ceramic bowl had been a mediator in that relationship, creating space for communication to resume. Dr. Yamamoto explained the science behind what Sarah was experiencing. Chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated, which disrupts leptin and ghrelin, your hunger hormones. When you eat mindfully, slowly, you allow your parasympathetic nervous system to engage. This restores normal hormonal signaling. So it wasn't about willpower at all. Willpower depletes. Biology is sustainable. You changed your biology by changing your environment and pace. This understanding transformed how Sarah viewed her previous diet failures. She hadn't lacked discipline or motivation. She had been working against her nervous system instead of with it, creating stress on top of stress, making calm eating nearly impossible. Claire, visiting for the weekend, witnessed this new understanding firsthand. "You're not even trying anymore, are you?" she said, watching Sarah eat dinner. "Trying to what?" "Control your eating. You just eat." Sarah paused, considering this. "I guess when you trust your body to tell you what it needs, you don't have to control it anymore. But what if it tells you to eat too much?" "It doesn't. Not when it's not stressed and can communicate clearly." That night, holding her grandmother's bowl as she prepared for bed, Sarah felt profound gratitude for this simple object that had facilitated such complex healing. The bowl hadn't changed her. It had created conditions for her to remember who she'd always been, beneath layers of diet culture conditioning and chronic stress. The secret wasn't in the bowl itself, but in what the bowl made possible: presence, patience, trust, and the radical act of listening to her own body in a world designed to keep her disconnected from its wisdom. A year later, Sarah's life had settled into rhythms that felt both new and ancient. The ceramic bowl sat in its regular spot on her kitchen counter, no longer a tool of transformation, but simply part of her daily routine. What had begun as portion control had become something much deeper, a practice of presence that influenced every aspect of her life. Dr. Yamamoto reviewed her annual physical results with quiet satisfaction. Your biomarkers look like someone 10 years younger. More importantly, they've been stable for months. This suggests lasting change at a cellular level. It still surprises me that such small changes created such big results. Small changes repeated consistently reshape biology. Your nervous system learned new patterns. Now they're automatic. The automaticity was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Sarah's transformation. She no longer thought about portion sizes or eating pace. Her body had internalized these rhythms. The bowl had taught her stomach, just as Hiroshi had predicted, and now the lessons lived in her cells rather than her conscious mind. Hiroshi, now a close friend, often reflected on Sarah's journey during their regular lunch conversations. "You found your grandmother's wisdom," he noted as they shared a quiet meal. "She probably never thought of it as wisdom, just normal eating." Yes, sometimes what we call ancient secrets are just normal life, before everything became complicated. Claire, visiting from California, marveled at the sustained changes. You never talk about food anymore. It used to be constant. What you should eat, what you shouldn't. Guilt about yesterday. Plans for tomorrow. I think that noise stopped when I started listening to my actual hunger instead of fighting it. Do you ever miss the drama of dieting? Sarah considered this seriously. Sometimes I miss the hope that came with new plans, but I don't miss the exhaustion of fighting my own body. The most profound shift was psychological. Sarah had spent years viewing her appetite as an unreliable narrator, her hunger as weakness, her satisfaction as self-indulgence. The bowl had mediated a peace treaty between her mind and body, restoring communication that stress and diet culture had severed. Mr. Tanaka at the convenience store had watched this transformation with the quiet satisfaction of someone who understood traditional wisdom. "You learned the bowl's secret," he said one evening as Sarah selected her dinner. "What secret?" "That hungry and starving are different. Full and stuffed are different. The bowl helps you find the space between." This distinction had become central to Sarah's understanding. The space between hungry and starving, between satisfied and stuffed, was where balance lived. The bowl had taught her to inhabit that space rather than swinging between extremes. 3 years later, Sarah found herself preparing dinner for a visiting colleague struggling with her own food battles. She watched Jessica eat from a large plate, quickly and distractedly, then immediately reach for seconds, despite having consumed enough food for 2 meals. "Would you like to try something?" Sarah offered, presenting her grandmother's ceramic bowl. "That's tiny. I'll still be hungry." "Maybe. Or maybe you'll be surprised." As Jessica ate slowly from the small bowl, forced by its size to take smaller bites and pay attention, Sarah remembered her own skepticism. The bowl looked absurdly small until you understood it was sized for satiation, not appetite. Sized for enough, not more. "This is actually satisfying," Jessica admitted, surprised. "It teaches you the difference between full and satisfied." That night, as Sarah washed the ceramic bowl in her kitchen sink, she reflected on the quiet power of sustainable change. No dramatic before and after photos, no miraculous 30-day transformation, no social media documentation of her journey, just a small bowl, used daily, teaching ancient lessons about presence, proportion, and trust. The kind of change that happens so gradually you don't notice until one day you realize you've been living differently for months. The bowl returned to its place on the counter, ready for tomorrow's breakfast, carrying forward the wisdom of generations who understood that the most powerful habits are the ones that become invisible, woven so seamlessly into daily life that they feel like breathing. Sarah's transformation hadn't been about discipline or willpower or expensive interventions. It had been about creating conditions for her body's own wisdom to emerge, using tools her grandmother had always known were sufficient: presence, patience, and a bowl size for enough. If this story reminded you that real transformation comes from small habits repeated over time, not from overnight fixes, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to start this journey with you in the next story.